Yes, ma'am. Aruna, ma'am.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, ma'am. We can start, ma'am. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Education is the only tool to transform the world, and NEP 2020 is a way forward to bring the succession in the country by following 5 E's: engage, explore, experience, express, and excel. A very pleasant afternoon to one and all connected here for the 6th All India Educators Meet on upskilling and reskilling, redefining the future of school education. Day 2 of this virtual meet is focused on the theme Paradigm Shift in School Education. Since NEP 2020 brings the teachers to the forefront of this change as all its components aims at improving the results and classroom turnout ratio. Let us engage in technical session 2 and explore on NEP 2020 towards transforming school education with our expert, Dr. Leena Wadia, Chief Consultant, Committee for Draft NEP and Member Drafting Committee for NEP. It's my privilege and honor to welcome the keynote speaker of this session. I wholeheartedly welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I also welcome our honorable principal, the coordinating committee, IQAC members, and all the teachers for this session. I extend my welcome to all the participants, the leaders, administrators, and teachers of various schools across the country who add real meaning to this conference. Hearty welcome, dear participants. Let me take this opportunity to introduce the keynote speaker of the day. Dr. Leena Wadia is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, ORF, Mumbai. She received her PhD in physics from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and did her postdoctoral work in high performance computing at ETH Zurich. She has been a researcher at several places in India and abroad, including IIT Bombay and CERN in Switzerland. She has also served in the corporate sector as senior VP and CTO at a startup company in the telecom sector. Since moving to ORF Mumbai in 2010, Leena has been engaged in research and policy advocacy, primarily in education, but also in other areas such as renewable energy, public health, and sustainable agriculture. Madam has contributed to the preparation of India's draft National Education Policy 2019 as a member of the Technical Secretariat to Dr. Kasturi Rangan Committee and as a member of the Drafting Committee of the policy. We are very, very fortunate to have a great women achiever here. I now hand over the session to our resource person, Dr. Leena Wadia. Madam, I request you to take over the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Aruna, and thank you so much to the leadership at Christu Jayanti College, and especially Dr. Aloysius Edward, who has persuaded me to join this educators meet, and it's a privilege to be among the leadership of schools across the country. I'm delighted to be here. So what I will do is I'll begin to share my screen. I have a presentation. I will try to keep it short so that we can have much more time for discussion. I assume you can see my screen, right?
Yes, ma'am. We can see.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to 1 minute. Yeah, it's not moving the slides are not moving very easily, but I think I can manage. So as you all know, the NEP was released on the 29th of July, 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic. Before that, the draft National Education Policy was released on the 31st of May of 2019, the first day of the new government, the second term of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. So the policy documents have been out in the public space for quite a while. But what is new recently is that as of April 2021, the implementation steps forward for the NEP 2020 has come out in the public domain. It is called Sarthak, standing for Students and Teachers Holistic Advancement through Quality Education. It's a list of about 300 tasks, 297 to be exact. The tasks have been allocated to, agencies of the government like NCERT or the SCERT or the state government or the Department of School Education, Ministry of Education, and so on. And it talks about the timelines for execution. One of the first things I did was to see whether schools and school leadership and teachers were involved in the tasks, but not yet. This is all still tasks for government. But inevitably after this, the next step is school leadership and school teachers. So I would say that this is the best time to provide inputs towards the implementation. So as school leaders, if there are things that you would have liked to see changed for a long time, and you found an echo in it in the NEP, then this is the time to make an impact on the implementation. So it's very important for educators to know and understand the opportunities that are coming through the implementation plan of NEP 2020. This is my first talk on the implementation plan of NEP 2020. So what I will do is that I will focus on just one illustrative area of transformative change, because the NEP by all is really a transformative document. But for schools, I think one of the most important changes is vocational education, and the requirement by NEP 2020 that all educational institutions must integrate vocational education into their offerings. This is an incredibly ambitious goal, that every school, we have 1.5 million schools, of which maybe at least half are just primary schools, so they won't come into the picture. But we have about 280,000 secondary schools, and we have many more, schools with middle school and secondary school mixed up together. So all these schools and also all colleges have to integrate vocational education into their offerings. And the NEP is very ambitious because it targets vocational exposure, and we'll come back to this word exposure, to about 50% of all students by 2025, which is just 4 years down the line, which means that all of us need to understand and figure out how to go forward. I chose this topic because, the theme of this educators meet is upskilling and reskilling. Upskilling and reskilling refer to adults, those of us who already have, an education and are working somewhere. But when we talk about children, we are talking about skilling them. So, but I will mix up both of them, because if we want to skill our children, we need to upskill and reskill our teachers and our leadership. Yeah, I'll touch on teachers a little bit. I was going to talk about technology, but then I got the program and I saw that Guru Kasinathan is scheduled to speak after me, and he will do such a comprehensive job. I don't need to talk about skilling at all. Okay. So what were the goals of vocational education over the years? The Kothari Commission, which is 1966, we all know that, which preceded the 1968 policy, envisaged that 50% of all students in higher education and 20% of all students in secondary school, which is 9th and 10th grades, would take up vocational education. To this day, this goal is not achieved even till today. The program of implementation of the 1986 policy, which is made up in 1992, it set much more modest goals. It was targeting 10% of higher secondary students by 1995 and 20% by the year 2000. I'm sorry, just give me a minute. I'm just going to start some clock so that I know that I'm not overshooting the time. So of course, where have we reached now since the the 1986 policy? At the moment, in the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, we are targeting about 10,000 schools and about 1.2 million students, maybe a bit more, a bit less, which is much less than even 20%, you know. And so I'm talking about secondary schools. So we have made very, very little progress in the last 5 decades. So NEP 2020 is trying to change that, and it's trying to be very, very ambitious. What it wants to do is to, 1 minute, I'm not able to move the slides very easily. It's only going forward. I'm not sure, let me just see. No, it's only going forward and it's not going backward.
Madam, if you can share the slide, I think we can.
Yeah, no, I think I know, I figured out how to move it on my mouse. So I've managed to come back. Thank you. So what NEP is trying to do is it is trying to achieve the training skill development targets set by the government of India through its skill development policies, the first skill development policy. So vocational education and skill development are used interchangeably. So the government is actually talking about skill development policies of 2009, which actually said that it wanted to skill 500 million youth by 2022. Okay, this was in 2009. 2022 is next year. And of course, we are nowhere near that number. In 2015, we modified that target and we said we want to train 100 million by 2022. And that we may be achieving because I recently found out the number for a report I did. And it turns out that NSDC says that, and the government says that we are training about 10 million youth a year. So that means to reach 100 million, we need 10 years. We have not been doing this for 10 years. So we will not hit 100 million. But it's a good thing that we are training 10 million in each year. But that training, which is being done by the Ministry of Skill Development and the National Skill Development Corporation, is all short-term skilling. What the NEP wants to do is to do long-term skill development as well as vocational education in schools. When we have the children captive in secondary school for 4 years, that is the best time to train them for many things. So that's the difference between what is happening in the Ministry of Skill Development and what will happen in the Ministry of Education, where we will train children while they are still at schools and colleges over a longer period of time, hopefully preparing them for longer term activity in the skill development in the economy. So what it aims to do is to leverage the process of integration of vocational education into schools and colleges to also improve the overall quality of education that is presently available to students. And I'll come back to this topic again and again. What it's doing is therefore placing considerable demands on governments, on educational leaders, managements of institutions, teachers, industry and businesses to plan and deliver quality practical training for students. See, the main thing about vocational education is that it cannot be done in a lecture mode in a classroom. It has to be hands-on practical training. Most of the vocational education training has to be hands-on practical training, and this is where the challenge comes for everybody, you know. And I'll come back to this, that the NEP has made many important provisions of adoption of the National Skills Qualification Framework. I'll share a bit with you with that, about it with you all. And then and also a credit framework called the Academic Bank of Credits, which is really actually for higher education, but it will help prepare teachers for vocational education. So I think that it's relevant in today's discussion. So Reimagining Vocational Education was the name of the chapter in the NEP. and why did it want to integrate vocational education? So let's look at some of the main reasons. So the first one is that we want to bring back the lost culture of learning by doing, and the focus on learning rather than covering syllabus, and to be comfortable with covering less material in class, provided the students have actually been able to learn doing more. So the shift in focus is what can you do with what you know, rather than what do you know. Because at the moment, we are always focusing on what do you know, and we want to test what the students knows through rote examinations without asking what can the student do with what they know. So we need to change that focus, and this is very, very, very important. And of course, this process will then return autonomy to teachers in their classroom, because you see, it is the teachers in the classroom who will have to actually help the students do experiments, understand what they are doing, why they are doing it. And so they will have to figure out how to teach and how to evaluate, more importantly, how to evaluate the student. And this aspect of autonomy to teachers to decide their pedagogy and assessment has been very well highlighted during the pandemic, because suddenly you find that a lot of the pass out marks and the admissions will be done on the basis of internal assessments that happened in school. And I think people will find out that it's not the end of the world that internal assessments were used to make these assessments, and hopefully that will catch on. And because that's really what we want the teachers to be masters of their classroom, like it used to be when I was in school, but we lost that culture in the middle, and we want to get it back. And of course, we want to introduce ICT in a big way in all secondary schools. So when I talk about vocational education, many things that I have in mind are often ICT, and ICT because it is the right age to teach the kids, also because it is something that students consider cool, and it's also because India as a country has a huge opportunity in ICT, and therefore with a modest lab of computer lab, you can actually train children in many different aspects of information and communication technologies, even in rural areas. And this is so important because the economy is getting increasingly digital in nature, IT and IT enablement in everything, even in performing arts. I'm sure many of you have been to concerts where performing artists are either playing music on an iPad or using an iPad to control the whole feel of the concert, actually. So IT enablement is everywhere, and so we need every child to be natively comfortable, and the school time is the best time to do so. And of course, that's not just it. Where vocational education does not only mean IT, it means many other areas. So, but that will depend on the local area where the school is. So what the NEP would like to do is for schools to look at the local economies in their neighborhoods and offer one or two vocations to children so that they can actually be employed in their local areas. This statement has much more meaning in rural areas rather than in urban, because in urban, there's a lot of transportation available, kids are willing to travel and so on. But in rural areas, if a rural economy is being built around an automotive industry or a precision manufacturing, or I don't know, maybe a healthcare hub, or even an arts and crafts hub, then you need to train students in those kind of vocations so that students can continue to remain in their areas, because we know that survey after survey has shown that young people prefer to live and work in the areas where they have studied, actually. And this is true. It seems counterintuitive, but it's true. And of course, the most important reason is that GER today is under 30%, which means less than out of every 100 students who pass out of 12th standard, only 30% get admission into higher education. And so the remaining 70% need to enter the world of work. And therefore, to train them to be ready for the world of work is pretty critical, actually. So the first thing we have to understand is that there are two distinct streams of vocational education that we are talking about now. Post the Kothari Commission and the first and second education policy, what we were talking about is training students in 11th and 12th standards to actually go out into the world of work. A lot of that was being done in the ITIs and polytechnics, by the way. Okay, so people used to pass out of 10th standard, and if you wanted to become an automotive engineer, then if there was an ITI nearby, then you joined the ITI to take a 2-year course in automotive engineering or whatever. So ITIs and polytechnics have been the backbone of vocational education for 11th and 12th grade kids up until now. And those courses are really have a lot of practical component in it. But there's also something else, which is now it's called the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan for a few years now. And there, the schools are being supported by the Ministry of Education to run vocational courses in many different areas. And some of the areas that I was disappointed to find is retail and so on. I don't know why you should teach retail in schools. I don't think that's the right area to teach, but tourism, retail, beauty and wellness, these are some of the areas that I have seen being offered in 11th and 12th standard to students. But I think that ICT is probably even much more superior, and more technical courses are more superior to teach in school because they take longer time to teach, and you can make use of this opportunity. Of course, some effort in grades 9 and 10 also exist. But it's very, very small. And what is even more surprising is that in many states, it is only Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, ITIs and polytechnics that is actually running. The state governments are not really running a lot of vocational education efforts, even though education is a state subject and they should be running vocational education subjects. So that's training, high quality practical training to 11th and largely 11th and 12th standard, but also 9th and 10th standard. That's called vocationalization. That's the vocabulary that's being used at the moment. Now I'll talk about vocational exposure, which is something that NEP introduced and said that, look, why shouldn't middle school kids, learn about agriculture or food technology? How do you preserve food? All of us make pickles and jams and all of that stuff. So how do you teach them that? Or if there is a local arts and crafts activity going on, how you expose them to that. And that's what we mean by exposure, where the students don't necessarily need to do a lot on their own. They can do some of it. But the practical component need not be very high, but it gives this child enough as of a sense of what a thing is all about. For example, students learn a lot about biology in classrooms, right? There is no reason why we should not be discussing X-rays or blood reports or any of that kind of stuff in a class to sort of indicate to the children that these are all professions in their own right. The people who make the X-rays, the people who make the MRI scans or the CT scans, or the people who draw the blood and the people who analyze the blood, these are all related to the subjects that they are studying. So the practical training component requirements are much simpler, and it can be done. And this is really what the NEP wants will happen. Of course, the important thing to know is that the National Skills Qualification Framework expects that for a child to go out into the world of work after 12th standard, they must have vocational training up to the level of NSQF 4 or 5, so that means that they have a reasonable training. We'll come back to this point. Let me move on for now. So what I want to talk about now is that how should we do these vocational education training? And I'll start by asking talking about what's happening now. what is happening now, and this is what I have understood from states like Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. Maybe there are different models in other places, but what they do is that the money from the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is used to actually contract training partners of the National Skill Development Corporation and ask them to train the students. So the students are allowed to go to these to the premises of these training partners and get trained there. So the students are trained outside the schools. They are assessed outside the schools. They are assessed by the sector skills councils. Okay, and the training partners also provide assistance with placements. So it in a way you'll say, oh, okay, if the kids got trained, they got a job, they are happy. But you see, the problem is that nobody in the school, the teachers or anyone gets a chance to discuss what the student has learned in their vocational training and engage that learning with all the other learning that is happening in the class. So there's absolutely no integration. So the word integration is very, very important. There's no integration that's happening. So I'll give you an example. In the early stages of the NEP, the Prime Minister, when he was explaining, Prime Minister is someone who has actually understood the spirit of the NEP very well. So he gave the example that if there is a railway station in your village, please take the children to the railway station at the time that a train comes in and then talk to them about the railways. Okay. Now, if you think about the railways, what all can you talk about it to the child? It's not just the fact that is it a steam engine, or is it an electric engine, or is it or the technology of the building of the trains and so on. You can talk to them about the metallurgy of the tracks. You can talk to them about the technology used to guide the trains, to make sure that the crossings happen safely. You can talk about the sociology of train travel. You can talk about the economics of train travel. There's a whole curriculum you can teach around railways, you see. So what we want is that teachers collaborate to extract maximum understanding and learning from vocational exposure as well as vocational education that's going on in the school. What this will do is relate the children to life around us, and that makes it more interesting to them, actually, and that school is not a separate thing that does not have any connection to life around us. That changes. So what we want should happen is that we need a more integrative approach. So what we want is for the schools and colleges to take, PU colleges to take ownership of practical training, interact with local industry, and figure out a timetable in a way that maybe 2 afternoons in a week, the kids who are doing those classes can go out and learn something on the local machinery that is available. See, we don't have the money to buy all the machines that are needed for every school. It won't work, actually. And NEP has talked about school complexes, but even that it will take time to roll out. But if the teachers and the leadership of schools can take initiative to see what are the opportunities for teaching children about the various vocations, then you can figure out that you can send some kids to the local industry to learn. And then, of course, like I said before, you can do a lot of IT training inside classrooms, and all this will get incorporated into some of the integration will get facilitated through the National Curricular Framework that for school education, NCF-SC, that is being planned, and that is maybe work for it is already underway, And the other thing is that, we must have assessment in schools, and this SSC, Sector Skill Council, actually is a private sector industry effort. And there is lots of difficulties with getting SSC certification on time and so on. So it's very traumatic. So actually, the whole model of vocationalization needs to change, and all of you in the audience today are the people who can contribute to changing it. So I would urge you to think about this. Coming to vocational exposure, it's again, like I said, meant to bring back the culture of learning by doing, and introduce project-based learning and different ways of assessing students, and most of all also to develop 21st century skills, and to address the lack of aspirational value of TVET. But like I said, if you decide to teach a lot of IT related vocations, then the aspirational value is already there, because the IT actually blurs the distinction between blue-collared work, which is working with your hands, and white-collared work sitting in shiny offices. IT changes that distinction. Vocations in IT, you can be, data analysts, for example. And the NASCOM has a list of vocations around IT. So you can also, and Industry 4.0 about robotics, and, all the Atal Tinkering Labs and all of that are all part of what I'm talking about, is the aspirational value that will help create the aspirational value of TVET, actually. We can discuss this during Q&A if you like some more. And so, like I said, educational institutions must look towards local communities to decide which vocations they'll offer. And after a while, it'll happen that a student will say, oh, this school is offering this vocation, which I'm interested in, so I'm going to move to this school. That's going to happen. And we would like that to happen, because every school cannot offer every vocation. Every school can only offer 1 or 2, or maybe 3. I don't know. That number has to be decided by the school. And then if a child wants to learn a particular school vocation, they'll go to a particular school to learn it. So it is critical to help students understand their vocational studies. I've already mentioned this. Students need to get a holistic all-round understanding if they are to innovate and say, what can I do with what I have learned? What can I do? And then they will become entrepreneurs, and they will become, many of them will be self-employed. Indians like to be self-employed. Some 34% of our labor force is self-employed, actually. And this is necessary today because it turns out that even when our economy was growing very fast, there was not enough jobs for everyone. And now, thanks to the pandemic and so on, there really are not enough jobs for everyone, which is tragic, but we need to prepare our kids to deal with that situation, actually. And then, of course, what are the benefits? I don't have to say that. We all know that, we need skilled manpower for various sectors of the economy. And it's not just manufacturing, gems and jewelry. India has a very, very big industry in jewelry design, or like I said, healthcare, or, there are some 36 sector skill councils of different, each catering to a certain sector of the economy, tourism, or logistics. Now, logistics is something that has come into the forefront today during the pandemic, because we realize that we have enough oxygen in the country, but we just don't know how to get it from one place where it's being manufactured to the other place, you see. So the logistics and transport are very, very important areas. So there is a sector skill council for that. And of course, there is tourism, and there's retail, and there is many others, healthcare and electronics, and many others, pharma, and so on. So yeah, so many of these things I have already emphasized during my talk, so I'll maybe skip it and go ahead a little. But yes, I want to emphasize a little bit on the fact that what the NEP has done is entrust academia with the responsibility of partnering with industry. In the countries in the world where vocational education is very successful, that's Germany, Switzerland, Austria, to name just a few, there is a very there are laws to regulate the interaction of industry with students, and there is a sort of agreement between governments, educational institutions, and industry, three-way agreement that they will partner to train young people to take their places in society and in the economy. So this job now falls on the shoulders of educational leaders and teachers today, and this is something that we really need to think about. Then if we have created a broad enough base of knowledge and know-how and experience among institutions and their teachers, then we will be able to seed some research. We will be able to do more fine-tuned mapping of skills gaps. What do I mean by skills gaps? So it is that, India is a very unique country in the sense that we have so many young people who are searching for jobs, and we have on one side, and on the other side, we have industry who is clamoring for trained and talented young people. And these two are not matching, because industry is looking for skilled people. If automotive sector is booming, industry is looking for trained people in automotive servicing, automotive engineering, and we are not producing enough kids who are trained like that. So that is what I mean by skills gap. We need to always be aware of which industries are surging and train students for those industries, and that we are not able to do very well at the moment. So we need to do that. And like I said, there needs to be some standardization of practical training during apprenticeships. So there is what you call it, sort of agreed upon tacit agreement between everyone that we will ensure that the kids are learning and that they are safe during their apprenticeships and so on. And this can be translated into law, and it would actually be better if it was translated into law. I mentioned a little earlier that we need to train students for 21st century skills. And, there is a very famous report, I'm sure many of you have seen it, it was made in 1996. It was a report to UNESCO on, by a commission that UNESCO had created for 21st century skills. And the report is titled, and the name is written at the bottom. I'm sorry, I'm not able to use my mouse, so I can't point to it, but it was called Learning the Treasure Within. And what it talked about 4 pillars of learning. And the 4 pillars of learning was learning to be, which is self-empowerment, learning to live, which is how to be a good citizen, and learning to learn, learning to know, which is continuous learning. And that report was the first one that brought focus on lifelong learning, that today you have to be learning all your life, because technology is coming in and changing things more rapidly than we are used to. And that has to happen. And then, of course, learning to do, which has to do with employability skills. So UNICEF actually has worked with Indian agencies to convert this into all these things in the colored circles within the inside the wheels are characteristics that you would have heard about in the context of 21st century skills, which is communication, critical thinking, creativity. Yeah. Oh, I found my mouse. Wow. So communication, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, negotiation, resilience. Resilience is so important that if you fail, you have to persist and you have to have the grit to carry on. And these things are things that we need to teach the students as much as possible. So these are the 4 pillars: learning to be, learning to live, learning to know, learning to do. And there are characteristics that have been put together for that we need to teach children for. And what is good to know, and when I first met them, I thought, how do you teach somebody to be creative? I thought you are either creative or you're not. But actually, today it is understood that it's possible to teach children to do creative thinking. And therefore, we need to work on that. Similarly, we want children to have, and all of us too, to have more empathy towards each other and support each other. So that's part of citizenship and so on. So that's the 21st century skills that we are targeting through NEP and through the introduction of vocational education. I won't say more here. There's a reference to there's a reference to this in my references, so you'll be able to look it up. So, for the teaching of all this, what we want curriculum developers and teachers is to speak more about what do you need to know before you come into this course, which is therefore like specifying prerequisites for the course, and what you will know when you have finished this course. So it's like specifying that in this course, you will learn this. And once you have that, the teacher has that map and the student has that map, then you are working together towards it. And this is what we would like to see, this new culture coming together. And in order to help that to happen and to help lifelong learning and to enable student mobility and flexibility, NEP has made several provisions. It says that all the vocational education courses must be NSQF aligned, which is easier said than done. My next slide is NSQF, I'll show you. And then to say that, you know, one of the reasons vocational education failed in the past is because the students who passed out of vocational education did not get a chance to study in higher education because they were not eligible for entry into various courses. So for example, if you had done automotive engineering in ITI and you decided that you wanted to do, I don't know, some higher BSc or BCom or something, you were not eligible to join. And that's going to change. The National Higher Education Qualification Framework work on it is underway at the moment, and they will work in tandem. The school curricular framework and the higher education qualification framework and the national skills qualification framework will all be arranged to work in tandem so that the students can move freely between vocational education and mainstream education and back without the difficulties that they are facing at the moment. And like I said, a lot of teacher training has to happen. And, you know, the academic bank of credits is something that the NEP has recommended, and it is already announced that the government is going to build it. And the idea is that if you want to become a lifelong learner, then you take a course now because you need it for your job now, but you cannot complete the full course. So you store your credits, and then you take other parts of the course later, and you can get your degree at the end of when you have accumulated all the credits that you need. So that's what the academic bank of credits is about. And then the multiple entry and multiple exit options are just, they're just a convenience. I want to make this very clear because there's a lot of misunderstanding that, you know, it will allow students to just drop out this, that. That's not what it is. NEP wanted every student to have a fair chance to complete their degrees. In India, many women especially drop out for economic and men too, actually, for economic reasons, or because they get married, or because they move with their parents. And then if they are if you're in the middle of a 3-year course, you have to lose your 2 years or 1.5 years or whatever it is that you've spent. So in order to save that, we have introduced the multiple entry and multiple exit options, and all these are actually going to help students a lot going ahead. So students also need a lot of career counseling and guidance. And what is good is that the UNICEF has been working with Indian authorities. There is a portal that actually does career counseling and guidance. And the private sector partner that UNICEF is working with is called iDream Career, I think. So you can look it up. It's available free, if I'm not mistaken, for schools to use. And of course, you also need vocational aptitude testing, but you have to be very careful about vocational aptitude testing, because if you test the aptitude of a child and you say that, oh, you're not very good for at dancing, you don't have calisthenic skills, but the child is passionate about dancing, you can't stop that child. You shouldn't be stopping that child on the basis of vocational aptitude testing. So these are some of my last slides. I just wanted to show you what the NSQF looks like. It's actually, like I said, you know, it's just a lot of, it's some categorization. There are some 5 categories under which, you know, the specifications are made. What is the professional knowledge you need? What is the skill you need? What is the responsibility you must be willing to shoulder? So for example, level 4, at which students leave out of school, the responsibility, it says, is that, you know, you must be responsible for your own work and learning, which a 12th standard kid must be able to do. But I guess at 9th standard, you can say that you must always be working in under close supervision, especially if you're working in factories and things like that, right? So this is just a guideline of what kind of knowledge you should have, what kind of work you should be doing, and so on. But it needs to be fleshed out for every vocation, very well. And for example, in level 7, it says the responsibility says a student must be capable of supervising other people. Here it says you're responsible for your own work. But if by level 7, it says you must be responsible for the work of other people. Now, if I ask you, can a 21-year-old be responsible for the work of other people? We'll all say, oh, depends, right? We will not say that, yes, everyone can do it. It depends on the child. It depends on what it is that you want them to be responsible for. So therefore, the NSQF level, these are just guidelines, frameworks within which we have to work everything out. That activity is happening. Some of you may be interested and you might want to take over. So I just want to close now. These are my last 2 slides. Or maybe this is my last slide. I just want to say that, we have said that there are lots of implementation challenges. Some provisions have been made in the NEP, but we need to create a national council for the integration of vocational education so that, this council can work out many of these things about what does it mean NSQF level 4 for healthcare or electronics or IT and so on. And it can then we can also focus on training for green jobs like renewable energy and electric vehicles, because as a country, we are also committed to the sustainable development goals and so on. And I think I'll skip it. I want to save more time for interaction. So I just want to close by saying that, for all education leaders and teachers, you should be making plans for the transformation of your own institutions. So you can proactively engage in learning about what is being envisaged, and also changing our own mindset and changing the mindsets of all the people in positions of power, decision makers, so that we give our kids a better opportunity to try out. So the focus should not be on portions or examinations or career considerations of teachers and school leaders or transfers and so on. What we want to do is to make students and their abilities and their aspirations the center of attention. That's really what we want to do. And for that, we can engage with governments and the ongoing TANs, either individually or together. Of course, nothing can be done without additional funding. And of course, we need IT labs in every school. But I think that we will, as school leaders, we will also have to be a bit more entrepreneurial. We want government funds. Of course, there's nobody saying we let government off the hook. They have to fund us. But at the same time, it should be possible for us to go out and try and get some corporate sponsorship, some CSR and philanthropic funds to enable us to take up some of our more ambitious goals. Thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. Here are some references. That's the reference to Sarthak. This is the NEP policy. This is a report on vocational education that I wrote recently. And this is the UNICEF Comprehensive Life Skills Framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam.
I'll stop sharing so that we can get to the Q&A. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Participants, if you have any questions, you can put it in chat box to the co-host, or you can just raise your hand. We'll unmute you.
Yeah, even comments are welcome. Did you find the talk interesting? It's a difficult topic, but it's a topic that all of us have to learn about. So I thought we should discuss it. Yeah, there are some questions raised hands.
Yes, I'll unmute them one by one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Professor Chakrabani, you're unmuted.
Yeah, madam, it's a very interesting session, no doubt about it.
My very important question is, can you highlight a little bit more about the schools to come up with new ideas about the vocational course? It's because it's purely new idea to come up. As a school principal, I'm very much worried how to introduce and that new changes and all. So it's a very interesting topic. I thought that I should get more focus on that particular issue, madam.
So just like NCERT makes curriculum for CBSE syllabus, there is an institution called PSS-CIVE. It used to be called CIVE, Central Institute for Vocational Education. But now it's called Pandit Sundarlal Sharma. So PSS-CIVE. They have a website and they report to the NCERT. They make curriculum for schools. Okay. And on their website, there is an enormous amount of material for different vocations, how to teach them. There are books books for the students. There are facilitator guides, and they are very helpful. And they also do a lot of training for teachers. So there is a lot of material already being prepared by PSS-CIV, just like NCERT books. There are books made by PSS-CIV for vocational education. But what we are also saying is that, if you are in urban area, then of course you have much more choice about what vocations to offer your students. But if you are in a rural area, then, and you know that the child wants to stay in the rural area after they have studied, then you want to look around in the local area of your school, in the district maybe, or in just a much smaller area. Districts are quite large, to see what is the economy of that area and plan vocational courses based on that. That is not easy to do for us educators, because we have not been looking at industry at all. We look at schools as an independent unit. We teach them something and then the kids go out, and it's not our problem. But we have to change that if we want to be a good job.
So we have to change our attitude looking at the system itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you start the conversation, if you take the initiative to start the conversation, more people will join in and more ideas can be exchanged, and more things can be done. Thank you for that question. There's someone else? Mr. Marapan, I think, right? Aruna, can you see him?
Yes, ma'am. Unmuted, ma'am. Unmuted, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Marapan.
Mr. Marapan, you can speak.
You're muted, I think, or I don't know.
No,
We can't
hear you.
Unmuted. Unmuted, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you hear us? We cannot hear you.
And we cannot see you also. No problem. We'll go to the next person.
May I say something?
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Right, yeah. Thank you first for the session. It was really nice. What I would say is that, yes, this whole arrangement of children being allowed to kind of move from a stream into another stream, it kind of de-stresses the child. Definitely, they are going to be under less stress. And it is a good option for them because it really helps them to kind of, sometimes children are searching. They are searching, and when they go to different places, then maybe they are able to find something that really touches their heart, and it is that they can work from. What I was thinking is that vocational training, which has been talked about so often in so many years, we need to talk to the parents about vocational training. Because our parents in India are definitely not convinced about vocational training. Times when we suggest that children who are more practical by nature rather than cognitive, them to go in for a practical course or an ITI course or a diploma course, and the parents just throw a fit. They are just looking at a degree. Even the child cannot pursue a degree, not bothered about that part. So I think, as educators, I hope that we all have some kind of a plan in mind to kind of, explain to parents, the need for vocational training, or the the potential that vocational training is offering our children.
That's right.
Thought
So
that, kind of
no, it's very well said. Thank you for that, for bringing out that point. I touched on it on my talk where I said that, there is a stigma mental thing around vocational education, saying it's
Absolutely.
not fashionable, it will not lead to careers. And this is why, as a strategy, I said in the beginning that why don't we start with ICT related things? And it turns
Right.
out that there's a lot you can do in ICT, for in secondary school. Of course, in primary school, you can expose children to dance and music and
Right, yes.
food technology and healthcare and whatever. But in
Right.
higher education, in secondary school, if you start with ICT, it's something that is cool. Nobody's going to refuse, saying that no, that's not something that we want to do. So strategically, we might enter that way, but we must then over time spread out into other areas. So we'll have to figure it. I think we're all going to have to be clever about this to kind of help children succeed. See, this is a trust deficit society. We have to be clear about that. That
Yes.
parents are afraid that teachers are pushing their children into certain directions. That's why I said vocational aptitude test. She doesn't have aptitude for math, so don't give her math. So parents are worried about that, and this is a trust deficient society. So we'll have to build trust.
And
so
also, to encourage parents to look at children's quality of life.
That's right. Yeah.
There is no quality of life with our children. Job satisfaction is never talked of. It's always, everything is kind of, valued kind of, it's weighed in how much money will he make. Yes, we all need money.
Thing,
But, that's what I thought. Okay. Yeah. But
thank you so much. Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't continue because there are some 5 other hands. So thank you so much. But you lead the way and you start the conversation. That's very important.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Father Shiju.
Ma'am, Father Shiju here. Ma'am, thank you, Dr. Leena, ma'am. It was really a wonderful and one of the best talks on NEP that I have attended. I'm attending a few. Maybe 2 concerns that I would like to share. You were talking about also the ICT. Most of the schools have this ICT in their schools. But when you talk about other vocational trainings, the problem is being like I'm from a private unaided schools where finance is a big issue. Well, the government will be able to support. I don't think that's a possibility at all at any point of time. Even approaching companies and factories and all this, I don't know how far that be possible. That's one of the things with regard to finance, and plus training of teachers on this. That also will involve specialization of teachers, and we may require more manpower in the schools and vocational training. So that would be a serious concern. Second point is in the vocational training, exposure of students to the realities are very important, as you explained, especially, how much parents would be open to the young children, maybe of class 8, 9, 10 students moving out, where even these days, even one-day picnics are cancelled because of accidents. And these days, you can never predict the violence. Violence at any point of time can just erupt from any corners. So that would be a serious concern. So how do we deal with these 2 issues? One is finance, another one is safety of kids.
Yeah. So I would say that if you have an ICT lab, if you have a lab with, lots of computers and so on, then there are many, many trades that you can teach children. It's not just programming. You will have to teach programming. Now, programming, my kids learned Java programming in school. ICSE has in 9th and 10th standard in school. You teach them programming, but, you can teach many other things. If you would combine it with, say, robotics or data sciences, data analytics, or look at algorithms. You start with algorithms with pencil and paper and then implement them in labs. So then you understand, just get an introduction to what do we mean by AI or machine learning and so on. So then you don't need that much investment. But I think what will also happen is that Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is spending a lot of money, but it is paying the private sector sector training partners of NSDC. So if we change the model and say that, no, you spend that money into setting up labs in school. And then one of the very interesting ideas that came out of Haryana is hire engineers as teachers in school, 1 or 2 engineers as teachers in school. You see, then the engineers are very happy to look after the IT labs, but then they have an engineering degree, so they are capable of teaching other subjects. They're very versatile. And then you can use them to integrate into the vocational education, into the faculty, the entire faculty, get science teachers to talk to the vocational education teachers, and social science teachers to talk to the vocational education teachers, and so on. So they can be given the task of integration, and they can be given the task of talking to industry to find out what are the opportunities. Of course, with safety and parents and all, these are challenges. The fact that we have challenges cannot stop us from proceeding. We'll have to, the challenges are specific to specific locations and situations and so on. And I will leave that to all of you who are leaders who know better than me how to deal with those challenges. All right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Sir, you're unmuted. Marapan, sir, you're unmuted.
No, but I can't hear him.
Sir, please check your audio, sir. We are not able to hear you.
It says he's muted now. Now you're unmuted. Please. I could hear you a minute ago.
No.
Good evening, ma'am. Your presentation was very interesting. But
Thank
my
you.
preoccupation is, if the rural students are given training in rural setting with rural resources, their eyes are always fixed on the towns and cities, affluence of cities and better opportunities. They like to get trained there rather than stay in the rural setting. What do you say?
So that was my thinking also, until we found a lot of surveys that, for example, there's a Professor Shastri who saw sometimes on television because he's also a cephalogist. He used to be at Jain University, but he's somewhere else now. But during the NEP work, he actually did a lot of surveys and found that more than 70% of the youth he surveyed wanted to stay in the areas where they had grown up. So it seems like migration is necessitated by economic aspirations. So I mean, if you don't have a job in the rural area, then you migrate in the hope that you find a job in urban areas. And therefore, our job is to create jobs in rural areas. I used to also think that until I saw the data. That's why I said that lots of surveys are showing that people actually prefer not to migrate if they can make a living in their areas where they studied. That's the if.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So there are lots of questions in the chat box about parents. So I just want to say that, parents will always want to play it safe, right? I mean, and we have to understand the worry of the parents. But if we were to understand what the scope of each vocation that we are introducing is and explain to parents, I'm sure we can carry at least some of them, not all of them. And that's a beginning. And then when children do well, then more parents will follow. So it's always like that, there will be about 20% of the parents will lead, another 20% will be unmovable, and then the remaining 60% in the middle are parents who will actually follow if the lead 20% succeeds. So we'll have to deal with parents and their aspirations for their children in that manner. That's all I can really say.
Thank you. Maybe we will have one last question, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think we have a Father Johnson. Father, you can go ahead. One last question. Yes, Father.
Go ahead.
Father, please unmute and ask Father.
Hi,
Yes,
good
he's
evening.
unmuted now.
He's unmuted, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, your presentation was so good, very
Thank you.
enlightening.
Yeah.
But I have one small problem with my state where I live.
Which is?
I'm from Nagaland.
Okay.
To talk about vocational training and things, we don't have a single industry here.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
We have no opening for our students. We do not know what to teach them actually. Which course to introduce, because we have a lot of problems like this.
Right.
There is
right.
no opening for them. No connection with the outside world, like, and then we are a bit remote.
Right.
And
right.
most of our places are very interior, and we
Right.
don't have much access to the modern communications and many other things that which we enjoy, which others enjoy in the towns.
Right.
So in this case, what would you suggest? I know, of course, government will come forward. I know all those things, but only it is in the paper, and then it remains only. I hope you understand what I mean.
Yeah. No, I understand. I have been aware I met somebody from Tripura, and they were saying also similar things, that you are living in, incredibly beautiful nature. So then, you have to teach them environmental sustainability and all of that. But also, I think today, because of the pandemic, there is so much acceptance of working from home in the IT industry, for example. So maybe that's one of the things that you want to leverage, to say that, these students can then work for companies from their homes, from their region. Of course, the bare minimum you need is a good internet connection. So that's something that you'll have to, but as an institution, if you were to take it up with the internet service providers and with the IT companies, tech companies, then maybe you can help your students. I would love to talk to you offline to figure out what we can maybe do together, but at the moment, this is all that I can say. But institutional efforts, I would say that we must make institutional efforts. I mean, because individual students struggling to find jobs on their own will not work, but institutional efforts can help large numbers of students. So we should work on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Aruna ma'am, we can go ahead.
Okay, sir. In the chat window, actually, we could see flooded responses from the participants, appreciations, as well as there are many more doubts also, many more questions also. We'll forward your questions to madam and we'll send you the responses. Since we have to begin with the next session, yes, sir.
I just wanted to say that my email address is on the presentation. So, know, if anybody wants to write to me, please feel free to do so. It would be a pleasure to interact with everyone. Thank you all for attending. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Arun.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for the active participation as well as your queries. We'll respond you. Okay. So I think we can conclude now. It was really an enlightening session by our distinguished expert, Dr. Leena, on features of NEP, especially on vocational education, potential benefits of integration of vocational education, comprehensive life skills framework for India, and its relation with the 4 pillars of learning. Thank you, madam. Your thoughts and wide knowledge touch everyone gathered here. My sincere thanks to Dr. Leena Wadia, who readily accepted our invitation and gave all of us an enriching experience on features of NEP, for preparing us to find a new way to bring changes in the country through the powerful tool of education. On behalf of everyone gathered here, I thank you, dear madam.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address this audience. It was my privilege to be among you all. Thank you all for your time. Bye-bye.
I also submit my sincere thanks to all the delegates and teachers for the effective conduct of the session. With this, we have come to the end of technical session 2 of day 2. the technical session 3 on teaching for global competence with EdTech, sustaining teaching excellence in virtual classrooms by Shri Gurumurthy Kasinathan, founder, member, and director, IT for Change, Bangalore, will begin in another 10 minutes. So let us join back in the same meeting ID in 5 minutes before the commencement of the session. The meeting will be live. We request you to take a short break of 5 minutes and join back. Thank you one and all.